It's the Behind the Shade show.
What about the people who think, maybe they even feel, they're like, you know what, Patricia Terrain, my partner just doesn't understand me. He or she doesn't hear what I'm saying. How do we overcome that?
How are you saying it? Right? Sometimes is the approach. When I talk, one of the rule or one of the strategies of the intention, action, perception model that I think I've talked about it before is the three columns of communication. So column one is venting, say what you need to say, but not to the person. Column two is deciphering the message. So beautiful. We go from what I want to say to what's the message I want the person to receive. The third part is so important, which is knowing that individual, what is the best delivery method? And if you know that the way you're doing it doesn't work, you know a delivery method that does not work, right? So it's maybe trying to figure out what does work. Like, how can you receive what I am trying to say? Because it just seems to get lost in translation a lot, and I'm at a loss. So it's having a conversation about how to communicate before I'm able to actually communicate. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so if I were to take a step back and say that, okay, my audience, my partner doesn't understand me. Is it that they're not understanding what I'm saying, or is it that I'm not saying it in a way to be understood? Is that correct?
A little bit of both, but yeah. It's like, whose burden is it to be clear? Is it my burden to be clear, or is it the other person's burden to understand what I'm trying to say? And I think it falls a little bit of both. It's very cultural, by the way, right? Some cultures see the burden falls upon only one. Other cultures sees that the burden falls on only upon the other. I see a reciprocity. I feel like I want to be as clear as I possibly can, and it's my burden to identify what's the best way to reflect what I'm actually trying to say. But if I don't know how you understand things, then it gets complicated because that's a barrier, right? So I need to understand, how do you receive information to be able to give you the information that I want to give, and you need to be open to receiving it as well.
Is that hard for people to be open to receiving feedback on the communication that may not be healthy in their relationship?
Yes. So it's interesting because I have a couple clients that I'm working with, but there's a client that it often will express that I try talking to my partner, but my partner won't understand. And anything that I try to, when you try to give solutions and a person isn't yet ready for solution, what's going to happen? They're going to defend the problem against the solution. And what I notice is what you're telling me, it's your frustration with your partner that any solution is shut down is exactly what's being done here, right? Any solution being provided as an alternative way. Like, I cannot control other people. I can only control myself. So I can control how I say something, or expressing what the intentionality behind it, or shifting my approach, and with the hope that that would be reciprocated. But a lot of the times, what I notice is that the problem with the communication is I am complaining about what my partner is doing, especially within a couple, but I am doing the exact same thing. So the two are complaining about the exact same thing.
That's actually funny because I have heard that where someone will say, Terrain, I love her, I'm with her, she just doesn't get me. And then she'll say the same thing about him. And then I asked them, I was like, do you guys realize you're complaining about the same thing? Me? No, they're the problem, right? It's not I'm the problem. Like, is that ego? Is that something else? Or is it just a blind spot in the relationship?
I mean, there's a myriad things, right? That could be it, but we have the tendency of focusing on the other. So remember how I said, like, it's a lot easier for me to see how the other person is the problem. I had like sessions, and so my tongue's getting twisted here now. Um, it's easier to see what others are doing wrong than to see what we are doing wrong. And that's very normal. It's a lot easier for me to work on other people than on myself, the really cool thing about the IAP that I love so much, or when I talk about anxiety management or any of the coping strategies and the concept of pausing, is that at first, when we communicate and we react to each other, the reaction is so fast that it's like it happens to us. But as I start to apply the rule of three interpretations, the three columns of communication, and I can give a brief if any of the listeners haven't heard about those before. But all of these strategies require the pause button. And as we start applying it, instead of feeling like a reaction just hit me and I just like respond back, as I pause, things seem to go in slower motion, right? Because I start to respond. So let's start by going really quickly over the rule of three interpretations. So for those who have not heard me before, the IAP model from my book, Why Are We Fighting? Intention, action, perception. Intention is internal to us. So only I know what my intention is. If I don't tell you, you cannot know, unless you can read my mind, which that would be really cool. But also scary because I have so many things going on. Perception is internal to the receiver or the observer of the action. The only external thing is the action itself, and the action can be the word choice, the approach, nonverbals, or so many different things. When I am looking at or with the strategy that I call the rule of three interpretations, this is for the perceiver, right? The person perceiving an action. You have a fact. So a person did A, and then I have my immediate assumption of that fact. If I don't pause, I will believe that the assumption is the fact on its own. Right? So, for example, if I don't know, my friend was supposed to call me, but she never called me, I can immediately think, oh my God, what did I do? She's mad at me because she did not call me. That's my immediate thought. If I don't pause, that will sound like a fact. But the rule of three interpretations requires two additional interpretations. If I go worst case scenario, let me go best case scenario. She didn't call me because she's planning a surprise party for me. So, and then a likely case scenario, she got caught up with work and totally just forgot to call me. Maybe I can give her a call instead. Right? But that pause helps us go from reacting to responding. Does that make sense?
It does, because when you highlighted that, I like the example you gave. If someone doesn't do something, some people's immediate thought is to go to the negative,
Well, I
right?
don't know why we do that, but we do that.
Could it be that maybe some people are more, do you think it happens to people who are more prone to negative thoughts?
I mean, yes. I'll say yes and no. I do notice, I don't have any statistical, like I didn't do research on it, I mean, empirical experience. I do notice that we have the tendency of going worst case scenario. Now, it could be because there is, of course, we're talking about the biology, if we have the tendency for depressive thoughts or anxious thoughts and all of that, but we also have environmental growing up. Was my mom always a worst case scenario person, or my dad a worst case scenario person? How did I respond to the world, and how did the world respond to me? If I have a pattern of seeing worst case scenarios, then I'll think worst case scenarios. But I will say that worst case scenarios tend to be more pronounced because they're the ones that maybe hurt most. So I had a client, this was a while back, and it was related to grief. And she had expressed to me being very triggered whenever there would be a phone call because she had received a couple phone calls in her lifetime that were worst case scenarios, right? The deaths of loved ones. And I remember asking her one day, how many phone calls do you receive a day? And she looked at me and was like, I don't know, like spam, there will be maybe like five, but phone calls, let's say maybe like 10 to 15 or 20 phone calls a day that I may receive. And I said, and how many of those are worst case scenarios? When you put in the totality of all the phone calls, the actual worst case scenarios may have been an exaggeration, 5% of the totality of all phone calls that she's had in her life. But the worst case scenario was so pronounced that its intensity felt like 90%. So that's why I think we have the tendencies kind of like preparing for the worst. And it goes back to the concept of defense mechanisms and triggers. Our triggers are things that have marked us, right? We've been hurt by something, so it becomes a trigger to us. A defense mechanism is created to protect us from that hurt. So if I expect the worst to happen, I'm prepared for the worst. But once the situation goes away, a defense mechanism just becomes our way of life. So now I'm so used to always going to worst case scenario to be prepared that I live in that gloom and doom space.